Turn down the lights, turn up the weekend. Week 3 in the NFL. We're going to talk about how the Broncos can go out to LA and get a dub, something they've rarely done at SoFi Stadium on this edition of Denver Football After Dark. Denver Football After Dark on this Friday night in the Mile High City. A Friday night when, if you're paying attention to other sports, the Colorado Rockies guaranteed they will not be the worst team in the modern era of Major League Baseball because they got their 42nd win. They will not be as bad as the Chicago White Sox of last year. And they shot off fireworks after the game. They'd planned those fireworks, but they shot them off anyway. So now that that's done, that's where I was earlier tonight. Now it's on to the Broncos heading out to Southern California to take on the Chargers. They'll head out there Saturday, so will I. And in order to get this done, how the Broncos can win in Los Angeles, big part of it's going to come down to their defense and playing better than it did last week. The fourth time in their last 8 games that they've given up at least 450 yards of total offense. Something that's happened way too often, something that had not happened since the first 4 weeks of the 2023 season, and now it's happened 4 times in the last 8 games. So, time to move past that. So how are the Broncos going to move past that? Well, it starts by simplifying things on defense. And that's something Sean Payton talked about on Friday, talking about how this week on defense, the focus was on getting back to the basics. Here's Sean Payton at his Friday press conference talking about just that.
Look, we all look at, as teachers, hey, how we can clean some things up. You know, the player with a clear head and knowing exactly what to do plays faster, and then our job is to make sure we don't slow them down before the snap. So I thought we had a good week.
So perhaps too much on their minds, too much that they were thinking about. Because obviously there is sometimes a level at which you've got too much to process and too much to read, and your reaction is slower. Now, that being said, some of the big plays last week, you take Jonathan Taylor's big run in the second half, for example, and you've got DJ Jones flashing into the backfield pretty quickly, and he dives and he misses the tackle. And then you have Alex Singleton filling the hole, and he's in the right spot for what should be able to contain that and ensure that it's not a long gain. And then, of course, Jonathan Taylor goes right past him, and it becomes an explosive and very nearly a backbreaker, if not for the defense. And the one thing it did do well last week, which was stand up in the red zone and prevent the Colts from scoring a touchdown. 6 times into the red zone, only 2 touchdowns. That was the one area in which the defense did succeed. It was very much bend but don't break. And it only broke for touchdowns twice. So that was one positive that did come out of it. But in that case, I don't think that was having too much on the mind. That was more of an execution failure than anything, because Singleton was in the right spot to make the play, and he just didn't make the play. So, speaking of Alex Singleton, his play on Sunday and so far this season was something that Cecil Lammey, my co-host on Orange and Blue Today, did ask Vance Joseph about on Thursday. And here's VJ's response to how Singleton's done so far this season.
He is getting better every single week. It's good to have our captain back on the field, making the checks for us and keeping everyone in position to make plays. Obviously, it takes time to get your total movement back, from the ACL, and he's working every day, and it's getting better and better each day.
Make of that what you will. I mean, you're not gonna have the coordinator throw a player, especially a team captain, and especially a green dot team captain who's making the defensive calls. You're not gonna have him throw that guy under the bus. So certainly one thing that we've kind of seen is you've seen Vance Joseph kind of rally around Alex Singleton. So that's something that we've actually seen this week. The defense, you've seen them close ranks. You saw Pat Surtain take responsibility on Wednesday for the game that he had. He didn't put it on the ankle tweak that he had last week. He put it on himself. You have a lot of guys that have sort of looked inward in terms of what went wrong last week. That's a healthy thing. I think that's one of the positive things of the team culture that has been built the last couple of years is that the only fingers that are getting pointed are being pointed back here and not there. So in other words, when you have a moment like Dre Tillman with the leverage penalty, it's not a locker room of guys pointing at him. It's a locker room of guys that are saying, what could I have done to prevent this? And that's one of the healthier aspects of this Broncos team is that you've got players who focus on themselves and what they can do rather than what somebody else did or didn't do to cause defeat. And look, there have been some Broncos teams where there was finger pointing. I mean, you go, I think the most prominent example of that was 2016, the year after the Super Bowl, when it very much was a locker room that fractured offense versus defense, most famously after the Patriots game where the Broncos lost. I believe it was like 16-3 or something like that. And it was Russell Okung who said something in the locker room, and then the defensive guys kind of got back and were kind of in his face about it. And, that was basically the moment that augured the end of the season. Not long after that, the Broncos went out to Kansas City and got stomped. So that's not the kind of thing that's going to happen on this team. You didn't have the offense pointing the fingers at the defense. You didn't have anyone pointing the fingers at special teams, at leverage, at the call that Darren Rizzi made. None of that was going on this week. So that's I think the healthiest thing. So you can win in LA by containing the Chargers. You can win in LA by keeping things simple, making sure everyone is assignment sound. You can win in LA by making them one-dimensional. But here's the thing. The one dimension you're going to have to contain. Now, I would imagine LA is going to try to put the throttle down, and they're going to try to go at the Broncos secondary. I think they want to get the run going, but I think this may be a pass to set up the run type of game. So a key thing is you're going to have a matchup where somebody like Riley Moss, who struggled last week, Riley Moss is going to be going up against a Quentin Johnston or a Keenan Allen. He's got to step up and deliver. Like, that's going to be on him. Pat Surtain going up against Allen or Johnston. If Surtain rebounds, he's going to be fine. But the big thing about the Chargers right now, even though they're going to be without Will Dissly at tight end, and he's not a great tight end, but he did have a big game against the Broncos a long time ago, back in 2018. But this Chargers team now goes 3 deep with quality receiving targets. The veteran Keenan Allen, who's back there, and as long as he's healthy, he's productive. Quentin Johnston taking the next step, becoming a dynamic, versatile target. And then, of course, Ladd McConkey, who was DNP on Wednesday, but he's back, and that's going to be the big challenge for Jaquan McMillan in the slot. So Moss and McMillan in particular going to have to be on point in this game, because it's not just simply a matter of PS2 shutting down his side of the field. And this is, again, a much deeper Chargers pass catching core than it was last year, because Johnston has taken that next step, and now you got Keenan Allen in there. This is the thing that makes him dangerous. This is also part of why I think you're seeing Greg Roman, historically a little bit risk-averse, more favoring the run. I think this is why you're seeing him crank it downfield more often, because when you go 3 deep with quality targets like this, then it becomes more reliable. And, of course, you've got a terrific quarterback like Justin Herbert. I think legitimately a top 5 quarterback in this league. You can trust him to do all the things. So it's a big moment for Riley Moss too, coming off a rough game, and he's really lucky it wasn't rougher, because he's quite fortunate he wasn't called for there was at least one more penalty he could have been called for, if not 2. I mean, the Colts fans, I thought, had a legitimate beef. Let's put it this way, both fan bases had reason to gripe from last week about calls that were made or weren't made in the game. It was, on balance, when all was said and done, the officials were equal opportunity offenders in that contest. So you're hoping for a little bit better this week. So on to the other side of the football. Let's start with, of course, Evan Engram being out. Dre Greenlaw obviously out on the defensive side again, DNP all week, but also DNP this week, of course, was Evan Engram. No surprise after DNP on Friday, ruled out on Friday. And who's going to take over? This is an interesting question. In terms of the game day roster spot, it's as simple as Nate Adkins making his debut and coming into the lineup. So in terms of who's up and active, that's a pretty simple change roster-wise. There isn't another decision that has to be made. The question, though, is who's going to get those targets? What do you do in terms of who's going to operate in space as that joker type of target? I'd say you probably will see Lucas Kroll. He's the only one in the tight end room that really comes close to being able to approximate Evan Engram in terms of being able to run those routes and be effective and potentially make those plays, even though we saw last year he certainly had plenty of chances to seize that role, and he didn't do enough to take it, which is why the Broncos felt they had to go out into the market and get a tight end. I mean, Kroll did have a season's worth of shots last year and didn't launch as they would have hoped, Michael. So that's why Engram's here to begin with. If Kroll had delivered, Engram wouldn't have been necessary. But here you go. And then the other guy in the mix, I think you may see Pat Bryant run some of those routes too. So I think it may be a little bit of a village to replace Evan Engram. You are talking about also not a guy who was playing extensively the first couple of weeks. He played under 50% of the snaps over the first 2 games. So you're not talking about replacing 70% of the snaps here. So it's not something to where you're having to fill in a huge number of snaps in terms of replacing him. So anyway, it's a tough break though, and now you are looking at 2 of the 4 big free agent signees of the offseason not being available for this game. So now here we are through 3 games, and of those 4 free agent signees, you're going to have 4 man games lost so far, 3 for Dre Greenlaw, 1 for Evan Engram. So that's 4 through 3 games. That would put you on pace for, 4 times. So 4 through 3 games, that would put you on pace for 20 through 15 games. So that'd be roughly 23, 24 man games lost over the course of this 22, 23 man games lost over the course of a season, which would be that would be below that magic number of 50 I've been throwing around as far as the number of games you'd like to see played combined by J.K. Dobbins, Evan Engram, Dre Greenlaw, and Talanoa Hufanga. I pointed to 50, roughly a little bit under 3/4 of the possible games for those guys as a number that I thought was a pretty good target that you'd hope for combined from those four. And right now they're on pace to be a smidgen under that. So it's early, but not good. So extrapolating on the fly, yeah, doing the calculations in my head. So anyway, love hearing from you. Victory lap on doing your DoorDash right now. Richard Bass, when do you think we'll see Engram or Greenlaw? Well, with Greenlaw, as he was working his way through stuff on the side field last week and then saw limited work last Friday and unfortunately not even limited work this week, the thought went through my mind that perhaps they didn't want to bring him back for a turf game in Los Angeles, but maybe wanted to have him back for a grass field game at home against Cincinnati. So perhaps you're thinking about that. The problem is, again, usually in the Sean Payton era, working with Bo Lowry, their team's guru of all things, strength, nutrition, etc. Typically, they've had, for players coming back from being absent for multiple weeks, typically they've tried to do kind of a 2-week ramp up for a lot of these guys to get them ready. So that would necessitate usually a day or two of limited work this week and then bringing them along to full work the following week and then playing them. Kind of like we saw from Nate Adkins getting some limited work last week, moving up to full work this week, and now Nate Adkins is good to go. So that would mean deviating from that general pattern for Dre Greenlaw and accelerating it a little bit. So even though I think at home on Monday night might be a good opportunity, the other thing also that comes into play is that it will be a short week after Monday night before the next game the following Sunday against Philadelphia. So I do wonder if maybe the plan becomes now Philly for him coming back, to not have him play 2 games in a 6-day span with a short week. So that's some food for thought as well with Dre Greenlaw, that maybe next week becomes his ramp-up week, the start of the ramp-up, and then they finish the ramp-up the following week, and then he plays in Philly. So I'm just going by the patterns of getting these guys back that we have seen over the last couple of years, the pattern that was repeated in the last fortnight with Nate Adkins. So always consider that. I mean, we can't glean and grasp everything from the past, but we can get an idea from trends and past practices as to what this team may do, especially when it comes to their injury rehab protocols. They're generally consistent about wanting to be deliberate and take their time with guys, and they definitely appear to be playing the long game with Greenlaw, that they seem willing to sacrifice games now to hopefully have him available for the long range and the balance of the season. It's almost like they're just trying to hang in there now. I mean, look, Sean Payton, he said the same thing Friday today that I said on Thursday night show when I wouldn't call this a must-win. He wouldn't call it a must-win. He got out ahead of the question before it was asked, and he said it's important, but it's not a must-win. To kind of put that thought right there in terms of how even he views this game. It's important because it's a division game, but there's really no such thing as a must-win game in week 3. So that's another thing to consider in terms of the decisions they make on injured players coming back right now and even next week. I don't think they'd even consider next week a must-win, even though they might be sitting at 1-2 if they lose this game to the Chargers on Sunday afternoon. So, and Scott Taylor, I think that's a good point. Need him for the end of the season and the playoffs, of course. The other thing is all these games do count, and you have to win a certain amount of them to be a playoff team. I'd say probably at least 10. There are teams that have missed the playoffs with 10 in recent years, but realistically, 10 is where you've got to get to be talking about the postseason, and you've got to make sure you do that. Ethan asking, what inspired the After Dark series? Basically, Cecil Lammy and I did a few late-night shows occasionally after things like rookie minicamp, and there was an audience for them. And we did them after the draft as well, had a little fun with it. And then I thought, if I wanted to do a solo show and get some practice doing some solo shows, what time of the day could I usually do it? And this is the time of day I can do it. And so I thought I'd have some fun with it. And I just wanted to have a show that had a different type of vibe than any other Broncos show out there. Something that was a little more deliberately paced, a little different than anything out there. A little less hot takey, a little lower on the energy, I guess you could say. A little more mellow. As I don't know how many of y'all have seen Boogie Nights back in the day, but when Burt Reynolds' character Jack Horner is talking about what kind of sound he wants from his stereo system, and he says he wants it mellow. That's what I'm going for. Mellow. So, I can do saucy another type of day. Tonight, at this time, I'm going for mellow. So, no such thing as a must-win in week 3 unless you're the Chiefs. So, interesting question, Robert. Why struggle with the run game, including last year? Well, I think right now, you're definitely missing Malcolm Roach. That's not helping these last couple of games. I did ask Sean Payton today about how he thought Eddie Uwazurike has looked. Of course, Uwazurike played a career high in terms of percentage of snaps last Sunday, and thought he's come along. He thinks he's coming along well. Certainly, Uwazurike had to kind of gradually work his way back at last year after the suspension. But at the same time, you are losing something not having Roach out there. Last year, though, we saw this defense, especially down the stretch, struggling at the second level against the run. Some moderate runs becoming big ones, especially you look at the Colts game and the Bills game. And unfortunately, because you haven't seen Dre Greenlaw out there yet, and because Alex Singleton does not look like himself, while the Broncos have improved at safety with Talanoa Hufanga being a guided missile all over the place and cleaning up a huge amount of messes the last couple of weeks, they haven't fixed the glitch at inside linebacker. They haven't fixed the glitch at the core of the defense against the run, and that's been a problem as well. Jonathan Cooper has done a real good job on his side against the run on the edge. He's 5th in the league per ESPN Analytics in run-stop win rate, so he's holding up well. Nick Bonito excellent in pass rush. He's not on Cooper's level at setting the edge. That's just something that you kind of have to accept. Benito's very good at backside pursuit against the run. He's getting some Von Miller type ability in terms of backside run pursuit. So that's encouraging, but teams do sometimes run at him, and that's something that he's trying to get stronger. He improved there last year. He's still trying to get better at that. So I think it's a combination of a lot of things against the run. But I think kind of the most important thing is you got to improve at the core of the D. Because again, that big play that Jonathan Taylor had, that big run in the second half, Alex Singleton has that read perfectly. DJ Jones misses the tackle. He's in the backfield. He's got it ready. Dives and he misses. I mean, that's tough. It happens. I mean, DJ's in there quickly and he's trying to make a play. And he misses. It's tough, but it's okay. I mean, he's trying to make something happen. But Alex has that read really well. He's right where he's supposed to be. Doesn't surprise me. Alex is a really smart player. He knows how to read plays as they develop quickly. It's one of his strengths. And unfortunately, Taylor runs right by him. I mean, everybody likes Alex. He's a really good dude. And on a personal level, it's tough to watch because, teammates like him. Those of us who are around the team like him. He's friendly. He's accommodating. He's a quality guy. I mean, I don't root for teams. I root for good things to happen to good people. Alex Singleton is a good guy, and I root for good things to happen to good people. And so when something bad happens to a good person, it's tough, mates. And I know, so that's about that is the length of my rooting interest, is I want good things to happen to good people. So hopefully he'll have a better day on Sunday. So that's, the joy of sports is that until the season ends and until your career ends, there's another game. In baseball, as they say in baseball, you can have a bad day, but momentum is the next day starting picture. In football, momentum is the next game, or sometimes it's as simple as the next play. So, oh man, appreciate you, Craig. Thank you. The NFL IQ. But here's the thing about the NFL IQ. It's only because I've listened to a lot of people who know more than me, are smarter than me, and I've just tried to gather as much wisdom, as much accumulated wisdom from players, from coaches, from scouts, from people around the sport who, like I said, they're more well-versed than me. And I've just learn. I mean, I try to, I asked Sean Payton today about, because he's talking about how he gives the players kind of scouting reports on the officials. So I asked Sean Payton, hey, does that affect how you coach? Like, how you call plays because of an official? Honestly, the question popped in my mind, and I was, because I'm genuinely curious about that. Just kind of, he was talking, I asked one question, then it led me to ask another, because it just popped in my head, does that affect how you call, does that affect how you call play based on, whether you've got an over-officious, in the parlance of Marv Levy, centenarian, and still going strong. It's happy to say. He, what he said, Sean Payton did say he didn't know that it does, but at the same time, he did say that, you've got to know what they call. You've got to know if they're heavy on calling one set of fouls, if they're light on another. You've got to know if they're going to be more likely to call taunting, if they're less likely to call taunting, that sort of thing. So, just on Fridays, sometimes I today, I don't go in with a question in mind. I just sort of listen to what he says, and then something he'll say something that leads me to ask a question, because it's a follow up to something he says. So Friday is also, and you'll probably see this in off season content. Friday press conferences also, I think, have led me to chop up some sound bites that I think will lead to off season shows that will fill gaps, because there's a lot of like football philosophy there. So anyway, you can't rely on a clean called game. You can't, well, no, but you do know that some officials are going to call more than others, and you do actually know that some officials are going to be more, and some officiating crews are going to be more reliable than others. I mean, you do know, you get an idea which ones are going to be more accurate and which ones aren't. I mean, just like in baseball, you know that if CB Buckner is behind the plate, that you're going to have a strike zone that is maddeningly inconsistent. You're prepared for that. You're prepared for something that's, for if it's on the inside, if it's on the inside corner, it's going to be a strike in the first inning. It's going to be a ball in the third inning. You are prepared for inconsistent adjudication with some officiating crews. I think the Broncos were prepared for some inconsistent adjudication last week, and they got it. So anyway, are they hiding a bigger injury with Dre Greenlaw? Why not simply add him to the IR? Could have saved a roster spot. They believed Dre Greenlaw was going to be back earlier. It's not hiding something. So Dre Greenlaw was on the practice field on Labor Day. And then Wednesday, 2 days later, he was DNP. So what happens sometimes is you've got a player who's on track. And remember, the previous 2 weeks for Dre Greenlaw, he was out there practicing. It looked like there was a chance he might even play in the preseason game in New Orleans. So toward the back half of August, he's trending up. And then he's out there on Labor Day for that bonus practice on that Monday. And then setback, and he goes to DNP. I mean, clearly, we don't have a lot of firm information, but you can assume something happened, because all of a sudden he went from ramping up and seeing his workload go up to DNP. So that's just kind of putting two and two together in terms of the patterns that he went from doing more and more and more work to the workload going down. So when that happens, then it becomes a matter of, okay, you don't know. Okay, you're thinking, okay, is this 2 weeks? Is this 3 weeks? And you're not sure if it's going to be 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. And if you're not sure, you can't put them on IR if you don't know. If you think it's going to be 3 weeks, then you're not going to put them on IR. So sometimes, you don't always know 100%. And if you don't know 100% and you think it's 2 to 4 weeks, you're not going to put them on IR if you think it's 2 to 4. If you think it's 4 to 6, then you put them on IR. But if it's 2 to 4 and you're thinking, oh, well, it could be 2 to 4, which means he's back in 2, 3, 4 weeks, then 2 or 3 weeks, then you're not going to put him on IR if it's if it is in that period of time. So that's why I get what you're saying, but believe it or not, sometimes they don't know. It's the human body. It's not, this isn't a car. It's not changing a spark plug. It's, sometimes these injuries, they don't respond exactly as you'd hope. And you can't put everything on a precise timetable. You'd love to, and sometimes you have an idea, but there's a reason why sometimes you say 1 to 3 weeks, 2 to 4 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks, why you have a broader timetable than just saying exactly 2 weeks, because you do have variance involved with, as John Fox would say, human talent. When he'd say that, I'd think to myself, what, as opposed to cyborg talent? Like, but again, if it was a cyborg or if it was a machine, you'd be able to say, oh, well, it's going to be exactly this amount of time and that's it. But you're dealing with human beings. So anyway, appreciate that. Appreciate the question, but sort of got me on my soapbox here of saying, like, sometimes, the problem is we as humans, I think we as people sometimes have trouble accepting the words we don't know. I don't know. And that I could go on a huge tangent about this. I could be this could encompass like metaphysics and religion and anything. But I think human beings as a species have a lot of trouble with the words I don't know. And they have to kind of create things to fill in that gap, to try to create reasons and structures to compensate for that. Like, there must be a reason. Like, there must be something to cause it, and there must be something to, in this case, it must be something to where exactly how long it's going to take. And I don't know or not having something precise is not necessarily a good enough answer. So anyway, that's me. Sorry. Anyway, Denver football after dark here on this Friday night. As I go a little bit off track there. Has Reed or Bailey gotten any reps this week? I mean, they get a standard amount of reps in practice. We don't see how many reps they get, Ronald, because we only see individual periods at this time. Once we get out of the preseason, we do not see in the media, we do not see full practices. So just a blanket thing to say, any questions about how many reps players get with units, with first teams and all that, we don't know, because we're not watching practice beyond just the individual periods. So we're seeing the drills, the individual drills, the drills that they have with their position groups, but that's all we're seeing. So I appreciate that, but there are those words again. We don't know. A typical team will give a handful of first team reps to backups just to get them comfortable. Like a typical team will give, say, Jarrett Stidham, anywhere from 4 to 12 first team reps during the course of a week, just to keep him comfortable and make sure he's got some reps in with the first team receivers and the first team offensive line, so he's not going in blind. That's pretty typical, and you can kind of extrapolate that with other players as well, rotating in and so forth. You see teams rotate, they'll rotate different offensive line combinations in. So, for example, if Alex Palczewski or Matt Peart has to go in, they're not going in blind. And you even see that during training camp as well. So, anyway. Monica, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Always appreciate the support from all of you who joined the show, watch this day after day after day. So, and come in here, Michael. I love seeing the familiar names in the chat night after night after night. So, even though the time is not consistent, although we've gotten right around 10:30 the last couple of nights, and now that I've actually covered my last baseball game for the season, because this week is the Rockies' last homestand. So I think we'll probably be zeroing in at about 10:30 Mountain Time most days going forward now as we get into the rest of the year, unless it's something like me watching a basketball game or something like that. Well, in other words, if this show could be delayed by a North Carolina Tar Heels basketball game, but that won't come up for another couple of months. So, and shout out to, I know my mom is watching, because she's very interested in those games too. So, Jensen, new viewer here. How long these streams typically last? Typically, the streams are roughly around an hour. Sometimes they go longer. Some streams have gone an hour and a half, even 2 hours. It's just kind of how long I feel like going. Sort of how long the chat is, and how long the questions are coming in, and sometimes it's just like my schedule as well. I mean, one thing that will probably keep this just a little below an hour tonight is as soon as I get done, I go finish packing and then go to bed. I've got a flight in the morning to Los Angeles. So the next time y'all see me will be probably a stand-up from Santa Monica or Venice Beach or something like that on Saturday, doing my pregame breakdown from some scenic spot like I like to do, and just sort of show that I'm out there with some of my thoughts on some other keys to the Broncos winning this game. And then of course there isn't a Saturday night show. This is the Friday night show. Usually serves as the pregame show. It'll be a little different schedule next week because of a Monday night game, and we'll get into that as next week goes on. Silent Sticks. Bo needs to run, but not too much. I'd say Silent Sticks. He needs to run, but judiciously. The threat of the run, though, I do like that because, and I go back to something Chris Harris Jr. told me more than once over the years. Again, part of the accumulated wisdom of people who know more than me. Chris would always say, when you've got a running quarterback, it just means there's a little more that you've got to think about, that you're thinking, especially as a slot corner, because you're a slot corner, you're working on the inside. So the slot corners got to keep a little bit of an eye on the QB if he's mobile, to know that he might have to peel off his man in coverage and take care of the quarterback coming out of the pocket. So that dimension does add a little bit of stress on the safeties, on the inside backers, on the slot corner. So you don't want Bo running too much, Silent Sticks, but you don't want him to completely abandon that threat either, because you want it to be there just to give everybody something to think about. Derwin James is a terrific safety, arguably the best in the game. But you want to give him a little something else to think about when he's back there in coverage. So that's why. That's why I like seeing Bo. I don't want to see Bo run 5 times in a game, but I don't mind seeing him run 3 times in a game. I think that's fair, and he's pretty good about making those decisions. The other thing I like about Bo when he does run, he doesn't dawdle when he takes off. He makes that decision quickly. That's one of the things that, unfortunately, a couple of years ago with Russell Wilson, as his speed was slowing down, he seemed to make the decision to take off and run too late. And then combined with the quickness that he was losing as he was getting into year 11, year 12 of his career, it took something that was once very dynamic and very effective for him and made it less so. Whereas Bo makes that decision in a hurry. As Rush would say, if you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice. Well, you could also say, if you choose to make that decision late, you're making the choice to get sacked, basically. So you need to commit to the run quickly if you're going to do that. And Bo generally does a good job of doing that, in my opinion. So Dennis Reisman, I like your premonition of 2 turnovers for the Broncos in this game. Now, of course, Marion Hampton had that fumble last week, and I do wonder if that fumble is going to give the Chargers a little bit of pause about having him too involved in this game, and perhaps maybe we see the Chargers get Najee Harris more involved and throttle back on Marion Hampton until he finds his way a little bit. So that's something to think about as well. Mario Augustin talks about how they might use Nate Adkins in this game, sneaking a pass to the red zone. And the funny thing is, when Nate runs a route in the red zone, it seems like he's wide open, and it seems like good things happen when they get him involved. I loved what Sean Payton was saying when he was talking about Adkins during his press conference today / Friday, depending on when you watch this. And he said they had to go through a whole mess of film in order to see him catch the ball. I believe he said 11 games of film from him at South Carolina before they could actually see him catch it as a tight end. So it's not his strength, but he does all the little things well. Something tells me Nate Adkins is going to be a guy who's going to be around this team for 8 years. Just a reliable plugger, does a lot of little things well, helps you on special teams. He's this decade's Patrick Hape. If you remember Patrick Hape, he was on the Broncos from 01 through 04. H-back, tight end, fullback, special teamer, just did a lot of little things well. We could plug him in all around, and also a very good goal line target was Patrick Hape. And he did the same thing for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for 4 years as well. So that was when I was going to USF in Tampa for a few of those years. So I felt like I was kind of following Patrick Hape around almost, because I came to Denver and he was here. So Denver Football After Dark, Sharon with a compliment. I appreciate that, Sharon. Thank you very much. A supercomputer. Well, sometimes this supercomputer does occasionally have a virus and kind of transposes things, and I think some of that is just because there's been so much that's flooded in there over the years. And as I told somebody a few weeks ago, I see a number out there for the Broncos in practice, and if it's not a number like 27 or 80, an iconic number, if I see a number like 23, with all due respect to Jahdae Barron, I see a number like 23 and I think of like 5 different guys over the years. Like I can just kind of go through players in my mind. If I see, I start, I think like, oh, like Nick Van Etten wore, so-and-so number, or I start thinking of like training camp guys, like, like back in 2002, Frank Rice out of Colorado State wore this number. I remember him making plays. Or Adrian Medice in the 2003 offseason was a standout player. You start kind of going through it. I was actually talking with Chris Thomas on the Denver Gazette, and I was telling him the story of the Broncos back in 2005. If you remember, I don't know how many of y'all were following the team back in 2005, but remember when Mike Shanahan basically imported almost the entire Cleveland Browns defensive line? Courtney Brown, Gerard Warren, Michael Myers, Ebenezer Ekubon, and they came over, and Ekubon and Brown and Warren were all high draft picks. Courtney Brown, the former number 1 overall pick. And then a year later, brought in Kennard Lang, also a former first-round pick, brought him over from Cleveland. And that was sort of the thing for the Broncos for a minute there, was every Cleveland Browns defensive lineman was brought to Denver, and they were the Broncos. So, and I was telling that story, and I'm like, gosh, like, and I looked around, and I'm like, they're probably, and I looked at the media corps, and I'm like, gosh, there are probably maybe like 2 or 3 people out here remember that like I do. Like, good grief. I'm getting old. C-3PO from Star Wars. Yep, Monica, I just hope they don't wipe my memory like at the end of Revenge of the Sith, when the droids board the cruiser, and they tell Bail Organa tells him to have the protocol droid's memory wiped. Oh no. Oh yeah. Please don't wipe my memory. I don't want that. Bold prediction: Nick Bonito with 4 sacks. Woo! Ooh, that's spicy. That's spicy. Nate Albert, George Payton's first 3 picks not looking good so far. All right, I appreciate that, Nate, but can we not judge draft picks after 2 games here? Can we just say, let's just step back and have a little patience here? I mean, 2 games. Come on, man. Jamin, the injury report. Sternad, full practice. Yeah, he'll start Sunday. Full practice by today. Good to go. No issues for him. He's going to be good to go, ready to go. It'll be him, and it'll be him and Alex Singleton at inside linebacker on Sunday. So, anyway, comment from Robert about Zach Allen. Need him to have a good game. I mean, he was generating some pressures last week, but he's got want to see him finish. He's the pressures are good, but he'll even tell you he's got to make sure he finishes. So, how much could it hurt to swap Singleton for Bailey and letting Alex be a rotational player until he heals fully? The one thing is Alex is your green dot guy. Green dot on the helmet, which means he's relaying the defensive calls. It's pretty hard to take a green dot guy out of the lineup. Generally speaking, that is not done. And if it is done, it is not done without a lot of thought. And generally speaking, if you take a green dot guy out of the lineup, it is like changing your quarterback. It's not something that's done willy-nilly. And I get what everybody is saying, but that is not something that appears to be in the cards at the moment. So, just that's what I'm going to relay to you. Who's covering the tight ends, Donald? Well, as we saw last week, it'll be a little bit of a village, but remember, they don't have Will Dissly in this game. It's Tyler Conklin, and I imagine they will activate Oronde Gadsden II for this game. He has yet to play for the Chargers, so that might be a rogue element. But tight ends, Conklin has 2 catches for 50 yards so far this season. So tight ends have not been a huge part of what the Chargers have done so far, but I imagine you'd see, kind of like last week when they are involved, a little bit of a joint effort, but probably unlike last week where you see sometimes the corners, this is going to be more your inside backers, your edges when they drop into coverage, and your safeties involved with covering the tight ends in this game. So anyway, bring sunblock, weather calls for orange sunshine. Well, at least I'll bring it on Saturday. I've actually got my little spray can of sunblock right over there on my table ready to pack, so it's good to go. So, appreciate this, Javier you're in Korea. Wow, man. And by the way, thank you for your service, Javier. Appreciate that. All the way on the other side of the world there. And yeah. Man, that Broncos country worldwide. Appreciate it. And appreciate that. And Tucson, Arizona, or as it's been said on What We Do in the Shadows, Tucson, Arizona. Back injuries don't get better. This Ingram thing is getting worse. I'll tell you, the other thing you worry about is when you're talking about a 9-year veteran with a back issue. That is something that does concern me. A veteran getting into this stage of his career, as I get a little comfortable, a back problem, that is something about which you get a smidgen nervous. Let's put it this way. You just hope it's not Chris Bryant back issue. Of course, Chris Bryant for the Rockies. I mean, that is like the worst thing, one of the worst things I've ever heard of. Chris Bryant, of course, one of the worst contracts in Denver sports history. Chris Bryant has lumbar degenerative disc disease, and that's why he has not played much this year. Hopefully it's nothing like that with Evan Ingram. My word. Lumbar degenerative disc disease. That sounds like the one of the most awful things I've ever heard of for an athlete in terms of like a physical ailment to keep them from playing, like something that's like muscle, back. Like I'm not talking about an illness type of thing, like something, like physical in nature. So, man alive. Lou asking any chance if they trade for a linebacker. I don't think so right now. You don't see a lot of trades in September. The trade market does not usually get going until October and mid-October, typically at that, because right now, no one's worse than 0-3. Dolphins 0-3. No one's at the point where they're saying they're sellers. It's too early. So everybody's still jockeying for position right now to know who and what they are. I mean, we're still in that race to get better that you see in the first month. Teams are still not yet fully formed versions of themselves. So that's a question to revisit in about a month as far as whether this team ends up trading for a player, and then who and what they could trade for in terms of who and in terms of which players and what in terms of which positions. But right now it's too early to talk about that because the market simply has not formulated yet. So I appreciate the question. It's just not something that is coming up right now. It's just simply way too early. So Monica saying, I want to have a surf session with Cecil and a 2-on-2 basketball game with you and Cecil. I want to see, oh my gosh, that'd be funny. 2-on-2 basketball will be interesting. I can still hit free throws pretty well. I can still kind of, to this day, I can still go out there and hit 7 out of 10 pretty well from the foul line. Takes me a little bit to get my stroke back from 3-point range. I gotta shoot my way into a groove. It's sort of like Jeremy Crawshaw punting before they started doing the random punts in the middle of practice. Like he had to kind of get into a groove and then hit 7 or 8 and then get them right. So hope JK is serving as an informant on the Chargers play calling philosophy. He did say this week that anybody who asks him anything, he's telling them that basically the vault is open. So anyway, do I think the Broncos sign Luke Wattenberg to a long-term deal or they look for someone in free agency? Or the other option is they look internally. Now, I think if they don't re-sign Luke Wattenberg, I think Nick Gargiulo had a pretty good chance of working his way up into a guy who could potentially start next year, but unfortunately he had the injury in preseason. He was coming along really nicely. The question then becomes, coming off the injury, does he pick up where he left off or do they look to move in another direction? So I think that's something to consider. Alex Forsyth, back up last year, did pretty well as a starter, especially as a run blocker. I don't think you can dismiss him as well. So I would say if they move on from Luke Wattenberg, I wouldn't necessarily dismiss the internal options there at the position too. So Mario asking about my favorite touchdown celebration. I think you actually mentioned the bucking Bronco ride, or that I think that was pretty fun that Kyle Johnson had back in the day. So. Nate asking if I see Herbert going after the linebackers, having a big game targeting the middle. I think he'll target the middle, but I don't know if he'll necessarily be against the linebackers. I think he'll look to kind of target. I think he'll look to go to McConkey quite a bit. I think he'll look at the McConkey against the slot. I think he'll look for McConkey against J-Mac, and I think J-Mac's going to have to come up big in this game. It's a challenge. Mac against Mac might be the most important matchup of this game. McConkey against J-Mac, Jaquan McMillan. So Anyway, Denver football after dark here. We near 1 hour, actually coming up on 1 hour, and this is probably the moment where I say I actually have to get myself ready to go to Los Angeles and catch my early morning flight for the coast. So my flight's at 8 a.m., which of course means got to be at the airport at about 6:30 in the morning to get there early. And, you know, DIA is not near anything, so you can figure out how soon I have to be leaving here from my pad here in DTC to be getting over to DIA. So I've got an early wake up and an early flight, and then check in out there and bring everything from another road trip to you on YouTube, on Twitter, on all the social media channels at denversports.com. And Broncos going for their second win and what they hope of the season, and what they hope is their second win at SoFi Stadium. SoFi's been kind of a house of horrors for them. They've played 6 games there since 2020. They've only won 1, and that was the game where Justin Herbert got hurt in the second quarter back in 2023. Every other game at SoFi, including the Christmas Day massacre of 2022 against the Rams, has been a loss, and some of those losses have been ugly. So SoFi Stadium is a place where there have not been a lot of good memories for the Broncos. Certainly there's a lot of hope that they can change that this weekend when they go out there. So we'll see. We're fixing to find out, as Gary Kubiak would say, if they can get this right here in week 3 and get into a tie for first place. I mean, it's not a must win like Sean Payton said, but it's one that I think has the capacity to shape the division race for a while. If the Broncos win this, they could hang with the Chargers for a bit. If the Broncos lose this and fall to 1-2, 2 games back of the Chargers, the reality is that unless something happens injury-wise with the Chargers, the Broncos will probably be in chase mode behind the Chargers for a good chunk of the season. Given the Chargers' schedule over the next several weeks, LA probably will be in first place for a while. Doesn't mean the Broncos can't catch them. The Chargers do have a very demanding schedule down the stretch. But LA getting a win on Sunday means the Broncos might be a bit behind them for a while and may have to be playing the long game in terms of catching up. Just kind of the reality of the situation, and patience may be required. As Annie Savoy said in Bull Durham, it's a long season, and you've got to trust it. We're only 3 games in here, 2 games in, and we're in week 3 now. So sometimes you just got to let this play out and be patient. So appreciate y'all being patient with me on this show, of course. Like, comment, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell for all the videos that pop up on this channel. And, of course, join Cecil Lammy and myself on Orange and Blue today. We've got a Saturday edition breaking down more on this game that will air. It will pop on the Denver Sports YouTube channel at 9 a.m. Mountain Time Saturday. So just pop in anytime in the midst of your college football Saturday. CU doesn't play until 8:15 p.m. against the Pokes, the Cowboys from Wyoming. So, pop on over and whether you watch CU or watch another college football game on Saturday, pop on over and check out our preview of the game. Got a few more clips, and we talk a little bit more about this matchup. So appreciate you joining me here on this edition of Denver Football After Dark, and I will talk to you Saturday from somewhere by the Pacific Ocean in Southern California. Look forward to chatting with you then. Till next time, take care. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you from sunny Southern California. Take care.